Welcome to the Beyond 3D podcast, where we explore all things 3D and the important role that 3D data plays throughout the manufacturing process, driving decisions throughout a product's lifecycle. Here, we talk with industry analysts, business owners, developers, and industry influencers, and hear real stories that you can relate to and learn from, and know which trends and technologies apply to your business. So join us as we go beyond 3D.
I know I sent around the email, but I thought a good way to start would just be for a 1 or 2 minute introduction all around, quick who you are and what your company does. And then we would just dive right into free flowing conversation, because we've got some interesting folks here from the construction industry, people in the CAD industry, kind of on the front new end of the CAD industry as well, and CAM and analysis. So I don't know what the hell's going to happen, but something's going to happen. So we'll start with that. You all know me. I'm Fritz, CEO of TechSoft 3D. If you didn't know me, it would be weird that you got this invite. I'll just go by the way I see the pictures. Yavuz, will you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. My name is Yavuz, and I'm the founder and managing director of Motionworks, a German company focused on developing CAM technologies, CAM for the manufacturing industry to keep CNC machines running. And we also work closely with CAD companies. We are looking at the Shaper topic, at the iPad, which is a brilliant application. I tested myself because to do the CAM, we need the CAD input, and also with topology, we are familiar because we are in the additive area. We are developing additive toolpaths as well. So I'm excited to be in the round here today.
Great. How about you, Mark?
Hi, everybody. I'm Mark Sawyer. Work with Trimble in Colorado. Trimble is originally a GPS positioning company, and now has about 60% of our business is software and not necessarily hardware and GPS systems. And I work in the construction sector here, strategy and business development activity. Before I came to Trimble via acquisition of a company I founded called Vico Software, and also in the construction industry. Before that, I was CEO at a company called Atlas, which made SketchUp. Sold that to Google, and now that's at Trimble too. So essentially, both my last two companies are at Trimble these days.
And even before that, Mark was at Autodesk. And speaking of Autodesk, Rick, how about you introduce yourself?
Well, am I next on your screen? Yes. So Rick Rundell from Autodesk. I presently at Autodesk, I lead our technology centers, which are basically an open innovation research function focused on the future of making, how digital information makes real things. And I lead facilities in Toronto, Boston, San Francisco, and we also have one in Birmingham, UK. My background is I'm an architect in architecture for many years, doing buildings for science and research and learning, and then moved into technology with Revit as a startup, and joined Autodesk with the acquisition of Revit in 2002, and have had a number of roles at Autodesk since then, including rolling out building the evangelism around building information modeling, putting together our first cloud and mobile computing software for the construction industry, which is now BIM 360, and then eventually ended up getting involved in the innovation space, where I am now.
Great. How about you, István?
Hey everyone, I'm the founder and CEO of Shaper 3D, where we are building a CAD system for the iPad Pro at the moment, and soon our Mac product is going to be launched, and also Shaper 3D is coming to Windows very soon. Our product is one of the flagship apps of the iPad Pro. We have been featured several times in different Apple marketing events, and as far as I know, we are the fastest growing CAD company since SolidWorks, and by some metrics, we are growing faster than SolidWorks actually.
Got it. Excellent. How about you, Matt?
Hey, I'm Matt Cedarberg. I'm the CEO of Coreform. So Coreform, we're developing next generation finite element analysis simulation technology that can we're commercializing what's called isogeometric analysis, so running simulation directly on whatever the original data input is. So that could be the CAD BREP, it could be a scanned file. We're starting to do some work on implicit surfaces. And yeah, so before that, I was the CEO of T-Splines. We made some industrial designs technology, and we sold that to Autodesk in 2011. So then I ran Alias Autodesk for a while.
Gotcha. Great. And how about you, Blake?
Hi, everybody. I'm Blake. Let's see. I'm the CTO of Entopology. Before that, I was with GrabCAD and then Stratasys. But let's see. I started a company before that called Space Claim, where I got to know Mark. But I'm advising István. I know Rick's. I met Rick socially in the Boston electronic art scene. Mark, I worked with very closely in the early Space Claim days, and wish we'd tend to work closer together. That was a bad decision from my side, Mark, if I never said that out loud. So yeah, it's great to be here.
We haven't talked for at least a few days, right? Like,
I was trying to buy him.
Yeah.
We said no because we wanted to do an A round, and then they got bought by Google 3 months later, and I had to work for Mike Payne for a while. It was awful. And the 10-year slog, we would have done better. I would have done better with the deal with Mark in 1 year.
Awesome. Well, that's great. As I mentioned, there's a diverse bunch of smart people with great experience. And obviously COVID has turned the world upside down. There's some really obvious things to anybody out there that, you know, collaboration software, this kind of video software, hardware for good, you know, for being able to have good video on calls like this. But surely there's some important things that are going to happen in our industry and kind of engineering software, both in building and manufacturing. And there's going to be some areas that are really ripe for innovation as people come out of the fog of COVID and say, shit, you know, this might happen again. And how can we be prepared, or where should we be investing in innovation? So since I have to put somebody on the spot to get the ball rolling, and since you have the word innovation in your title, Rick, I'm just going to start with you and get your thoughts and see where it goes.
Oh my goodness. All right, there you go. So I've been doing a lot of thinking lately. It's a little bit orthogonal, but about how our use of the physical environment, the nature of the physical environment, and the use of the physical environment is going to change as a result of this pandemic. And then, you know, a second order effect is, well, what kind of tools are people going to need in order to better understand that environment? So in the first category, I think of you know, the conversations everybody's having about, well, you know, what's the future of office space? You know, what is it? You know, what is the future of working from home? Bigger questions is like, why do cities matter? Like, what are cities for if we don't all commute into them to be together and work together? So big questions that I know, you know, lots of people in the world are thinking about. And then assuming that we do decide that we all want to be in the same place from time to time, and what are the functions of those places, and how do we make them safer and more resistant to the kind of effects that we're experiencing in the pandemic? And, you know, it's taken us a long time to understand exactly how this disease is transmitted, but it turns out it's, you know, mostly through aerosolized particles in the air, as opposed to all of the obsession that we had about, you know, wiping our groceries down with alcohol wipes, you know, to start with, right? So just like, you know, probably starting 15 years ago, 20 or 15 years ago, we were looking for tools to better understand energy use in the built environment. Architects didn't deliberately design buildings that were inefficient from an energy point of view. They just didn't have tools for understanding how those buildings would perform. So by providing those kinds of tools to the design industry, we're able to illuminate that in those designs with a different kind of light that gave people a different perception. I think we need now similar tools for illuminating those designs in terms of safety factors for sanitation and health. So very, very early days thinking about that. But if you think about other eras, when much of how cities are built today were influenced by earlier pandemics, right? So things that we take for granted in terms of sanitation and plumbing, and ventilation were really the result of trying to avoid this kind of thing, 100 years ago.
Right. Right.
So it's not, it may seem radical to all of us, but it doesn't necessarily feel radical.
Clean,
and of course,
go ahead.
Yeah, and everybody's talking about collaboration software and collaborating remotely. So that's that, of course. But I think for me personally, that where I'm looking forward to innovation is in the built environment and the tools that are delivered for designing that environment.
Yeah, so it's like keeping the air circulating cleanly is the new indoor plumbing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any follow-on thoughts to that, or you want to refute? Anyone want to refute what Rick had to say? You're wrong on every point.
Yeah,
Rick.
go ahead. Disagree with that.
I'll let someone else. I'll let someone else tell you why.
I think
those.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I thought those were all a bunch of really good points. And as Rick said, everybody's talking about collaboration and this kind of remote meeting and that type of thing. I do think remote presence gets redefined, and I don't mean just the ability for us to sit with video and look at each other. Back when everybody was making 3D caves in their office to kind of show off and win new business, it was, I saw limited use cases where it was really economically viable. If you're maintaining an underwater offshore drilling rig and you need an underwater welder to go down there, okay, that's good remote presence stuff. It's incredibly expensive and worth a lot of money. That was about it. And so now I do think an example that really opened my eyes, and Ron's heard me use this example before, is a city inspector. Our customers in construction wait for municipalities to come out and do an inspection before they can go on to the next thing. So they're constantly trying to find work they can do while they're waiting for an inspector to come and approve something they can move forward with on that. Okay. So they're also juggling the schedule and, doing all kinds of gymnastics for that. And, one municipality that I know of, and I'm assuming it happened more than I know about, is, did this remote inspection where a worker who is normally on site anyway is walking around with a camera and the inspector's back in his office in the city county building, and never had to commute out to the site, inspected the work, passed on it, and things moved on. That kind of remote presence is going to get better. And when you think of cameras, you think of 3D imaging, you think of holographic communication and imaging and those kind of things. I do think we're in the infant stages of that, and our gaming friends are going to teach us a lot about how to make remote presence work for design teams, construction teams, probably manufacturing teams, and that type of thing, where it's a lot different experience than what you and I are doing this morning, right? So I see a lot of room for technology there and making elaborate 3D remote presence affordable.
You were going to add something earlier, István?
Yeah, I have terrible contrarian views about the future of remote working. Honestly, I think
that's why you're here.
Honestly, I think that there's much less is going to change than most people anticipate right now. I think that all the conclusions that are being drawn about the future of remote working and working in general are based on observations that were made in a very special time, when you can literally not do anything else but eating, sleeping, and working. And these are your three options at the moment. And now we are drawing conclusions that, this is the future of work, because things are working more or less the same as before. But I think that this is just wrong. for two reasons. Reason number one is that if you look back, in terms of technology, not much has changed in the last 12 months. So if remote working would be actually more efficient and more effective than co-located working, we should have seen category leaders and market leaders in the software space emerging as remote first companies. But if I look at the most successful remote first companies or fully remote companies, those are always the second or third ones in their space, like GitLab, for example, versus GitHub, or InVision versus Figma, right? And I think the other thing that must not be dismissed is that people are saying that, yeah, the office is really just a space to socialize, and people are spending a lot of time with socialization and spending a lot of time with each other without working. And this is something that when people are talking about this, it feels like they're despising this, but this is what makes us human beings. And this is something that I think we should actually embrace. Like, these relationships are just as important as everything else that is related to work, and these bonds that you develop with your physical presence are actually super helpful with developing that trust that is the foundation of collaboration. So I think that, and I think that what most companies, especially big companies, have realized, that we can actually make this remote thing work for things that are probably not that important, maybe not even part of our core business. So let's make maybe 30–40% of our workforce technically contractors, right? And what these employees don't realize is that this will eventually make them second-class citizens in these companies. And I think I can totally imagine a future, and I might be wrong, but I can totally imagine a future where having an office space in a company is actually a perk. It's something that you are going to be proud of. It's something that will be a status symbol, that I have a physical presence in the office because the company is willing to pay for that office space because I'm so important for that company. So I think that what we will see is that second-tier jobs will become remote, but I think that first-tier positions and first-tier roles are going to be mostly co-located.
Interesting.
It's a good thought, István. And we are going to switch the policy as well after COVID. So we are building a new company building for 150 more people. So we are investing heavily, and but still what we will do is we will not go back to the old normal. So we will not ask everybody to come to the office. So what we will do is we will split the people to two categories. The one is the travelers and the other are the settlers. The settlers are the ones who commit to come to the office at least 3 days, 4 days per week. Then they will have a desk. They will be in their room with their own desk. They can put the picture of their family on their desk and nobody will touch their desks. And the travelers, they will have only the obligation to come once or twice per week to the office, but the rest they can be traveling, they can be in Bahamas doing their job, they can be at home, we don't care. They don't need to be in the office, but they don't have the right to own a desk. So they need to just use one of the pool desks. And this is a concept that has been worked out in Germany by some folks, and we find, okay, that looks quite good. And we are now working on implementing this policy in our office rules. And we are going to switch to this after September, when we are back to the office after the vaccines are finished in Germany.
Yeah, that's a really cool idea, because we're wrestling with that same thing about whether to just completely get rid of our office. And I like the settlers and travelers idea. I think for younger companies and startups, it's like Coreform over the last year, our ability to hire has just really improved, because no longer do we have to track everyone to Utah. So we just get the best people wherever they are without them feeling like they're second-class citizens. And so I think for startups, it's hard to imagine kind of going, maybe you delay having an office for a while because there's just so much to be gained by having a broad hiring pool.
Yeah, there's a trade-off between that bonding of like, hey, we're all in this together. We're the startup team, and make another pot of coffee because it's going to be a long night kind of thing, versus being able to attract anybody independent of location.
I think that part about remote working, that you have global talent pool access, I think that's just partially true, because what you have is global remote talent pool access. There are a lot of people who are maybe less vocal about their opinions, but don't want to work remotely. They actually want to have an office, and they want to be around people. So like having that access, yes, that's somewhat true, and certainly there are people who want to work remotely, but definitely not everyone.
Blake, you're looking really thoughtful.
We're working through these issues right now. I spent a half hour discussing this with our head of HR yesterday. She's trying to figure out what our policies are. And we're talking about doing things like the travelers and the settlers. I like that metaphor. István, you made a point I've heard made by early stage startup CEOs before, that, and I think there's some truth to it, especially when a company is forming its culture. I think forming culture is hard to do remotely. At GrabCAD, we were a 3-site company. We had Cambridge, UK, Cambridge, Massachusetts, and Tallinn, Estonia. And each office had its own culture. We had some shared work values that were very important, like code quality and testing and so forth. So the processes were uniform, and it was fun going to a different office because it would be a different culture, So I really enjoyed that. Later, I found that when I started doing more technical work, that my most effective day was to spend a half day in the office every morning. I'd go in, walk around with people, sort out whatever politics needed sorting out. And then after I usually get lunch with somebody and go home right after lunch. I go in early and leave early to miss the rush hour. And I just go home and write code. And this is when it's getting into implicit modeling. And I look at that as some of the most productive time of my life and highest value creation. And then, but on the other hand, Brad had a very similar opinion to you when I joined Entopology, and it was difficult being a remote worker and also trying to be a leading executive at the company and build out the company. That was a very, very challenging task for me personally. And I did have to travel a lot to make it work with the human beings involved. So I think there's a lot of truth to all of these things. But one of the reasons I was always going to Stratasys every day was there were 3D printers there, and I was always printing parts and doing tests. So I had to go in. I'll just make a personal point because we're still sorting through this as well. But I think we've all done a lot of traveling in our careers. We've had to, and I'll tell you that for me, being at home and working from home, I've been very productive. I've got a baby girl, and with my wife here, we're very, very happy. So I feel like despite it being a very stressful and scary year, I've had kind of the most sort of, in terms of work-life balance, maybe I feel like I finally achieved that for the first time. And I don't even know what to do with that. So I agree with what you're saying, but I think there are going to be a lot of different models that work.
Yeah. Yep. There's one thing that governments will always turn to in a stimulation package is investing in infrastructure and, fixing quote unquote crumbling roads and bridges. But I think there's also going to be a desire to say, okay, we're going to invest in infrastructure with the assumption that it's a different world going forward. As Rick was saying, like spaces might get used differently. Energy is going to be different. So if, where would you expect, if you're an investor and you say, there's going to be money spent on infrastructure, where are you going to put what kinds of things are you going to look for to put your money on?
Education.
Education?
Yeah, because what I see is, the subject is the innovation after COVID-19 times. And what I realized, because I had a lot of time for the last 12 months to think about different things at a zoom out perspective, right? Because the operational tasks have been less and it has been less distraction and hassle. And so one thing I've really realized is that the stuff that I've been working on started a quarter century ago, 25 years ago. I write the first line of code for CAM manufacturing. Now we have 200 people and we still do the same, and it's just getting to everybody, to every desk, our technology, right? And I think it's very similar with you guys, what you do. So it takes ages. It takes typically 25 years to get the technology properly established, right? But if you look at the COVID situation, we didn't have the time of 25 years to find a vaccine. So we said, okay, let's get a vaccine, let's produce billions of it, and we did. So that means if things are really serious, you can make a moon landing, and they did. And now the next big topic after COVID will be the climate change. So we need to decarbonize everything in 10 years, 20 years time frame, right? And I think we can do it, but what we need to do is we cannot rely just on the 1 billion people in the Western world and the engineers ourselves to do it. We need to get from the pool of 7 billion people, So if we can, in the Western world, increase the education level and also get access to developing countries' education increase, we will have enough engineering source, and then we need to find out better ways, not compete each other in a sense that everybody is doing the same but slightly different, but say, okay, there is, let's say, one solution here, one solution there, but we don't need to have 40 different solutions, and then organize ourselves in proper supply chains and try to shorten the 25 years to 5 years. And I think if you get there with proper education, with good unlimited amount of engineering capacity on the one side, and a real boost on mindset changing that helps us to share the resources in terms of the supply chain, that we don't want to own end-to-end everything, but let's say for Shaper 3D, there is the Parasolid engine running there, so you are not developing your CAD engine. If you need simulation, you use topology and so on. I think as we go into the components and have more educated staff, we have some chance that we can solve the topics of the world needed in the next 5 to 10 years. Otherwise, if we keep doing what we have been doing, we will not get different results, right? So we will get the same results. We will need to spend the next 25 years, and we will all retire at that point, and we will say, well, we didn't fix most of the things. We fixed 20%, so the 80% is for our kids and grandkids, right? So that was the kind of thinking I had over the last 12 months, and I struggled hard to find good examples where innovation was very successful in a very short time frame, like the launch of iPhone from Steve Jobs, the launch of Tesla from Elon Musk, the launch of the BioNTech shots or Moderna shots, and so on. And I've seen many, many other examples in construction industry, in manufacturing, where they will still need a quarter century because they are just slow, and it has been like this, and they are not going to change it, right? And then one last topic I would like to raise here is, in terms of a successful innovation, is if you look the new computer chips running 3 nanometers technology. These chips are coming from TSMC. They have 50% worldwide market share. They do the chips in Taiwan, and they buy machines from a sole supplier called ASML from Philips. A machine costs $1 billion. And these machines are built with the technology of Carl Zeiss with the optics and Trumpf with the laser. They are also single sources of supply chain. So it's amazing to see if these smart people, everybody innovating their piece, and at the end, you can buy an iPhone with a 5 nanometer technology, and next year it will be 3 nanometers. You have incredible computation power. This seems it is working. So it is like the BioNTech working with Pfizer to make these vaccines not only working, but also in the billions. And I think if you ask me the question about innovation after COVID times, I think if we use this as an opportunity to think a bit harder on what kind of things we would like to change, I think we can see it like that. Okay, that's the kind of before Christmas, after Christmas. We need to maybe start with a new mindset after the COVID time frame, and use this as an opportunity that we all have time to scratch our heads and to review what worked in the past good and what needs to be changed.
Just briefly, I just want to strongly agree with your sentiment that investing in education globally is the most important thing that we can do for the future of humanity. Everything you said, also poverty, population, the data shows that education is the most important thing to advance the world forward on almost every level that we consider to be good.
Well, it seems like we should drop the mic right at that, but we still have time, so we have to so we'll have to think of something to say. Well, so education in terms of kind of building the world differently in an innovative way. So beyond education, where else is it going? What's changing in manufacturing that's not temporary? That's not just, okay, well, for now we've got to deal with this COVID thing, but a lasting change of collapsing supply chains, or is that?
I can provide a tangible example that's COVID related.
Yeah.
So early on, there was demand for swabs for testing, and supply chains were crumbling. And all these people were sitting around with their 3D printers trying to figure out how they could help. And one of the really good ideas to emerge from that was the swab project. Started by Summer Decker at Tampa General, and then brought, I think, some folks in Boston. I know that Rick Phillip at Desktop Metal advanced a lot of ideas and got a lot of people working on the problem together. We got called because people didn't know how these things should work. They were using swabs and they needed to go to these plastic things. And so they wanted lattices. And we were thrilled that we could make a contribution. Annika from our team created a design of experiments with lots of different things. Because the beautiful thing about the swabs is you print them vertically, you can pack a lot of them in. It's one of the really few economically good products for 3D printing nowadays. Many are coming, but in terms of a mass production product. And so we did it, set up a tray, did a design of experiments, we did the test, and some of the swabs worked. So we had swabs in the market. Others went along and copied them, and then they followed. But we got we helped Origin and some other folks get swabs in the market very quickly because we could automate the manufacturing process and the design process. We could take something that would have been a serial and linear process and turn it into a parallel process, and we could use the computer to do most of the work. And that was the power of topology and the power of using fields and physics and engineering to drive the designs instead of having people draw all these funny things. So to me, generative design, I'll throw out our buzzword, the idea of using knowledge. Maybe all these educated folks can put their knowledge into engineering systems that know empirically how things respond to forces, to understand the environment, and then you can end up with parts that are a little better. Look, this is a manufacturing productivity, design productivity story, but it was really great that we were able to participate in one aspect and see it have a transformational effect.
Really cool.
I would say that's a great example, Blake. And within weeks of us shutting down our offices, the cry from Autodesk employees for us to do something with our maker facilities, right? It's like, we got to be making PPE, and somebody suggested, some senior leader in the healthcare industry in Boston said, oh, everybody should be 3D printing N95 masks. I'm like, oh my God, that was, turned out not to be a good idea. But we eventually found our way to being able to make face shields pretty effectively, and make a contribution to what was done. So that became a very motivating thing for our employees, and it made a little bit of a difference in the supply chain. But I think from the supply chain point of view, I think that everybody was kind of blindsided by how fragile supply chains are, right? And then think about the metaphor of a chain. One link breaks and you don't really have a chain anymore. And so I think moving to less fragile, supply networks or supply meshes or whatever metaphor you want to use, as opposed to a chain, is something that people are becoming more aware of. We were kind of lured by the economics of distributed supply chains into maybe a false sense of security, and until something really shook that up. Nobody had really pressure tested that idea, right?
Yeah, we were kind of.
So I think that's going to change.
Yeah, we were moving toward this. The world is flat. There's borders are an illusion. There's the one big connected network. But then in parallel, of course, there's COVID, but then there's political movements all over the place of countries wanting to be more and more isolated. Things like Brexit. We've had our issues here in the U.S. as well with kind of pulling in and getting less actually globally connected, even while, as Yavuz described, the power of being able to do things across these borders is really, really huge. It's a strange tug and pull.
We could get into a conversation about the opposition of capital and labor, but that might take us a little far from the topic here.
I have to set up a different one.
Muz's example was very capital intensive.
Well, communication.
It's kind of
tools are challenging, right? Like, to what role is social media causing folks to isolate and develop more extreme thoughts, not to sort of talk to their neighbors and understand what other people are experiencing and what their situation's like. You would think, us idealists in the 90s thought the internet was going to bring the world together, and for a while it did, until the system started to show some secondary effects. At Entopology, going from a mostly single site in New York to a distributed team, we had to change communication. And frankly, our internal communications, documentation, specs, all those kind of details that rather than being decided in a conference room, were put into paper. And obviously that's better for remote workers, but it also means that we have more equity in what we do. We can actually look up at the spec. What did we decide? What were we talking about a year ago, rather than having been erased from a whiteboard or be a photo of the whiteboard on somebody's phone? And so I don't really have a statement here, but we know that communication is important to the structure of society, and the aspect of remote work, maybe some of that reflects into it.
Mm-hmm. And Mark, in the construction world, there's been this move toward more modular construction, and one of the benefits is you need fewer people, which reduces your labor cost, but also when you don't need as many people, you can actually make it safer in a pandemic. Has there been, and do you think there will continue to be, this kind of rapid move toward modular construction and 3D printing buildings?
I think the move toward modular and or offsite prefab kind of methods in construction was awfully strong before the pandemic, and the pandemic didn't do anything to dampen that enthusiasm. So I think, kind of as construction gets back to work, and I think most firms are now, the trend will continue as much as you can do offsite, whether that's prefabrication, offsite assembly, or full-blown, kind of modular philosophy behind manufacturing buildings. That will continue. That there's the economic drivers, the efficiency drivers in that equation are immutable. They're inarguable. The issue is, can I get the building I want that way? Mm-hmm. And what's it going to take to get the building I want that way? And those are kind of long lead items, right? So you can't take a project that's in progress and because a pandemic hit, decide to put some of the work off site. It had to have already been designed and preconceived that it was going to be done that way. Logistically, it's not an alternative. It's an originating plan to do off site. So we kind of see that will continue. You do get safety benefits. You do get productivity benefits. You do get a more predictable supply chain because you got routine deliveries to a routine site, not custom deliveries to a one-time construction site, right? And so you can actually plan ahead on some of your materials and have at your offsite facility more than you will need for this project because you use it on the next one. Mm-hmm. So it has a lot of those benefits, cushion in the supply chain, if you will, kind of, extra slack. Yeah. And I think it's going to continue. I also see as things that we're not involved in, like building materials evolve, you keep chipping away at being able to do more and more custom looking without having to do everything on site, measured on site, cut on site, installed on site to get the building you want. So right. Yeah, it's been a strong trend before. All I can say about the 1 year pandemic, it did nothing to dampen the enthusiasm for prefab and modular, but it was a pretty strong trend to begin with.
That makes sense. And Matt, as you guys were starting core form, and then the pandemic hit and the realization of what it means and what the work world might look like, is there anything that made you think this is a better conditions than we thought for core form and what you're trying to do there? Like, this is good for the simulation world or the analysis world?
Yeah, good question. Nothing has gone down, and all of the projects that we're working on with customers are, as budgets are getting cut, none of the simulation budgets are getting cut. So it feels like, that's kind of generally the value proposition of simulation is helping, decrease time to market. And I think especially as other parts of like the design process are changing, then the ability to have like a new simulation technology that can accept a lot of different inputs, that can work seamless with new CAD. I think where we're at is, 30 or 40 years ago when CAD and CAE originated, they kind of came from different mathematical backgrounds. And so they've never been unified. And so now I think an opportunity that we see with some of our customers is as new CAD develops, having a chance to have new simulation technologies that work hand in hand with those is kind of a chance that doesn't come around every generation.
Topology is a good example of that. It's like, these are not two
Exactly.
domains. These are, build stuff that's not
Really
gonna
exciting
break
stuff.
all at once. Yep. István, is it your counter position on people working remotely isn't one of the big drivers for Shaper 3D is that people will be very fluid about where they're sitting and where they're working?
Hard to tell, right? It's I mean, look, it's perfectly possible that I'm completely wrong and I'm a lunatic and I'm just ignoring the sign of times, right? But yeah, I don't know, really.
Yeah.
I don't want to go into any further predictions. This is just my
it totally makes sense. It may well. I think that we see it even within our reasonably small company, 120 people. Maybe a third of them are dying to get back in the office and really want to be there every day and around their colleagues. A third feel being mostly remote has been great for them and are highly productive. And Blake, your point about being home, holy cow. Like most of us probably have the same situation. I haven't been home like this for decades, and it's really great. There's a lot of great things about it. It's great for family life. It's great for health. It's great for your sleep.
Ron, I heard you say, you and I were talking once, and you said something that customers expect us to travel less over the last year, understandably, because nobody was getting on a plane for business travel. But that bar for what the customer expects me to be at this meeting or not.
Yeah.
The bar for that has changed.
It has changed.
Right. And I do think, István's point earlier was, hey, you can't make all these predictions just based on these strange circumstances you're looking at right now. You have to kind of remember what normal was and make your predictions based on that. I do think it'll take a while for that bar to creep back up to, I got to jump on a plane and go see this customer or go see this business partner. I think it'll stay, this form here will keep it pretty low.
Yeah, right. So I totally agree. So it's not going to go back suddenly overnight. That's for sure. I'm more talking about what's going to happen in 2 years, 3 years. I think right now what we are seeing, especially at big companies, it's a political game between employees and the company. Like there's a lot of push from the employees to keep remote working, while companies most certainly prefer to have people in the office, right? So it's a war of worlds, I guess. And it will take some time to get back to something that is more close to the old normal. And I'm not saying that nothing is going to change. I'm pretty sure that those companies that were completely inflexible, they will be much more flexible. That's for sure, right?
Yeah.
And I think that also it makes sense to have maybe a day or maybe 2 days as a remote company every week. That's for sure. Mm-hmm. But what I'm most skeptical about, to be honest, is the hybrid setup. I think it's inevitable that a hybrid setup leads to first class and second class citizens in a company, simply because company politics inevitably happen no matter what you do, because that's just a human thing. And those relationships that are built in the office will be higher quality than those relationships that are built over Zoom. Right. And that will inevitably, not intentionally, but inevitably make remote workers second-class citizens if there is a hybrid setup.
Right. Good. Well, I've used the 45 minutes that I said we would use. When travel gets back, we will. I know that the bar for travel is going to be higher, but tech talk events and stuff, I mean, that's pretty easy to convince yourself that you want to show up at one of our fun events and have conversations like these. So thanks for
I'm going
as best we can. I'm in. Yeah. Great conversation. Hope you got reconnected with some folks you knew before or made some new friends, but This was cool. I have a lot of boring ass Zoom meetings, and I knew this wouldn't be one, and it wasn't.
This was terrific. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome, everybody.
Nice seeing all of you.
Hey, Blake, I need you on a call too. I have some situations I need to blow up, and I'd like you to just kind of come in and disrupt those for me. If I could use you as a guest speaker, it would be beneficial.
Right. Mark, anytime.
Awesome. Take it easy, everybody.
So long, everyone.
See you guys.
See you all.
Thank you for joining us on the Beyond 3D podcast, hosted by TechSoft 3D. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes and leave us a review, or subscribe on SoundCloud. To listen to past episodes or learn more about TechSoft 3D, visit www.techsoft3d.com/blog. Send us comments and suggestions at info@techsoft3d.com. Thanks again for listening, and we hope you'll join us again on the next episode of Beyond 3D.